Yeah.
Are we ready? Oh.
Yep.
There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. Public Works Committee meeting at 5:03 on Tuesday the 15th. And we are here to start discussion on the parking assessment, village-wide parking assessment that's been put into the Public Works Committee. And I thought a good place to start was kind of talking about the laws that we already have in place regarding parking, in particular the overnight parking, which to my observation has been something we need to address and I guess make a decision, hopefully as a result of this conversation, as to whether or not we're going to keep the ordinance in place, why and why not, and why we have it to begin with, which seems to be the question of the day. And also, is it something we need to continue? What has it accomplished? Pros and cons of it and so forth. So I'll throw the first question out, and I already kind of know the answer to this, but if my figures are correct, this ordinance has been in place since 1967, and I've asked Chief if he knows why we have this, and anyone that was possibly around when the ordinance was originally put in place is no longer available for questions.
That's correct.
No, I was around when it was put in place. I was in high school at the time.
Wow. Oh yeah, you were. You would have been.
Probably.
What,
Yeah.
this wasn't important enough for you to remember?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You would have been 17.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
Kelly?
parking
Didn't
overnight
care
was a
about
big
parking.
deal.
Yeah. So Kelly, I do think there is one reason that came up when we had that meeting before with the folks from Settle and Belmont, and I think part of it is because if everybody parked on the street, then there wouldn't be enough spots in the street for those who really need to park in the street. So
Settle in Homewood.
Yes.
Settle in Homewood. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. The thing is, ultimately, it's a couple of streets, a few streets where we have an issue, right, with regards to the parking. And I don't know so much it's about the overnight parking or not the overnight parking. It's more about the fact that there's just nowhere to park, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I have to agree with that.
So I was just trying to share one of the reasons I've heard about why this exists. Is just
Yeah, and I know we've discussed it specific to, I think, Homewood and Settle previously. And at the time we'd made the decision, I think that was July of 19, to go ahead and keep the ordinance in effect.
I think the decision at the time wasn't about so much the ordinance or not the ordinance. It was about the fact that we need to look at it as a whole, right? Like parking as a whole for the village. Because I don't think we ever addressed truly if it's an ordinance we want to keep or not.
Well, at the time we did make that decision, that was our recommendation to keep it. But to your point, Avi, we were more addressing a particular part of the village. And now we kind of have to look at the village as a whole.
because we could have.
But I'm just saying, we never voted on keeping an ordinance or not. It wasn't a committee, like when there was no like overall like council vote or anything on it, that sort of thing.
But the other thing that we could have done is we could have made Homewood and Settle exempt, like these other list of places, those other streets, right? That would have been one of the solutions. And what I took away from the people who came to the meeting, at least the majority of the people at the meeting, said they preferred to keep some limitations on how many people can park in the street, so there's enough spots for people to park in the street,
Correct.
So.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Rob, I mean, instead of making them, it'd be the other way around. I mean, on Homewood and Settle, you would make them exempt. I mean, we keep the ordinance in place on those two streets. Is that what you meant?
No, I'm saying we could have. I said at that time we could have made a decision to make them exempt. We did not. So I'm just building on what Kelly was saying, where we didn't vote to change the law, but we could have said, oh, we could make you guys exempt, but we didn't because of the feedback that we received.
Right.
majority
I guess what I mean now is though, is that if we were to get rid of the ordinance village-wide per se, we could exempt those, keep the ordinance in place on those two streets so that, you know, those who need the parking down there would be able to get the parking to Avia's point.
Yep, you could do that.
Yeah.
It's one of the potential solutions.
Okay.
Scrap it everywhere but those two streets.
Well, so I agree with that. If you start to go down that path, the thing you'll need to think about though too is, so are there other streets as well that would like to be in the same situation where there is an enforcement so that there are enough spots maintained? So you'd essentially have to do what the people on Indian View sent that letter to us that would say, let each street decide, do they want to be exempt or do they want to, you know, or do you want to blow up the rule and only have it apply to certain streets? You know, and then let those streets choose to opt into it.
Yeah, that is possible, I guess. I think one of the more sort of core issues of the discussion, though, is basically keeping the ordinance, not keeping the ordinance.
Right.
And I think, but you know, an element of that, and I think maybe Avia was kind of raising this point. We've had the ordinance; it's been around since, you know, the wagon train days, but it's virtually never enforced. So, and I think this might have been your point too, Rob. If we have an ordinance, but we're never really ever enforcing it, then maybe it's time for it to go.
Sure.
Yeah, that was kind of the point I was making. And I know I've mentioned this probably to all of you, if not Chief and Bill, a couple of times. You know, when we walk at night, it's 11:30, and Indian View Center, East Center, West Center, East Street. One night we counted 31 cars parked down the street at 11:30 at night. Obviously, I would assume that at 12:59 they're not coming out and moving their cars. So,
Right.
Gleaning from that is, if we were to enforce it, and I'm getting this from Chief, and you're more than welcome to follow up on it, but do we have the resources, or do we utilize the resources to go around and put warnings on those cars, and then obviously any other ones, I'm just talking about a few streets here, to issue warnings? Is that a productive use of an officer's time?
It would,
Well, here's the,
Go ahead, Avi.
go ahead, Chief.
it would take a lot of time away from the routine patrol on the night shift, which, you know, personally, I think there's more important things per se, being, you know, drunk drivers or checking the businesses to make sure that they're secure, nobody's broken in, that, you know, there's not a door that's been left unlocked. Routine patrol, you know, we've had several people either call me, send a email or whatever, because I've told our guys that I want them to, because of the vehicle, the thefts from vehicles and, you know, people getting in people's garages and stuff. I've told night shift I want them to go out, and when they find people's garage doors open, either leave them a note or knock on the door if it's an entry into the house, and, you know, let people know that your garage door is open. And I've gotten a lot of people either call and say, hey, thanks for doing that, or send an email. I think it's been probably a couple of years ago. I think that, Rob, you had sent an email in where one of the officers had left a card and said, hey, your garage. I think those things are a better use of the proactive enforcement on overnight than worrying about a number of cars that may have not gotten off the street. But, you know, and again, that's not my decision. That's your guys' decision. But yes, Ms. Rankin, definitely, you know, there is a better use of the time other than going around and you know, worrying about the vehicles that nobody's really complaining about, you know, on the street. So.
And so all I was going to say was before is, it's just that there are many streets where there's no reason why people can't park on the street at night, unless it's an aesthetic thing, that we, like our streets to be clear at night, right? So many streets that are not listed here as an exemption, there's no problem with people, parking on the street in terms of, a space issue or anything like that. I lived here for years and I had no idea that we couldn't park on our street overnight. People park on our street overnight all the time.
Yeah, and obviously it wasn't enough of a problem. None of your neighbors complained about it because you didn't get warnings or tickets, right, Avi?
Right, yeah. I mean, so it's just like, do we want to have something like that in place for streets that there's no reason why people couldn't park overnight, right? So,
I mean, if you look at it from an aesthetic point of view, it's obviously more aesthetically unpleasing during the day than it is between the hours of 1 a.m. and 6 a.m.
right. Right. Unless there's a really nice snowfall and you want to get a picture of your street looking all pretty, but yes.
There is that, and hopefully that will not be the case again this winter. So,
Well, you're the one that likes the cold weather.
I don't like snow, because snow equals salt.
Another consideration too, if we decide we're keeping this ordinance, and if we are going to keep it, then as the chief says, we probably have to start enforcing it,
Oh, yeah.
Somewhat more. Like Avi just touched on it. I mean, she's lived here for years. She wasn't aware of it. I think the information, about whether, do we have this ordinance? Does it exist? What does it mean? Is very limited. And if suddenly a bunch of cars started to get warning tickets or even citations, my email, my phone, probably yours, the chief's, it's going to blow up because it's going to be, hey, what the devil is with the ticket? I didn't know anything about this. So if we're keeping it, before we would start to enforce it, I think we would have to engage in an informational campaign of some type to give people, the residents, a heads up that, hey, look, we have an ordinance, it's been on the books and been discussing it, and now all of a sudden we're going to start enforcing it. And I'm not really even sure how that makes us look.
I will say, when this really blew up was off of Homewood Road, and people were complaining. And so we started enforcing that every night. And like the mayor said, I got, it's a dang you do, dang you don't. I got half the street that says, hey, I think the ordinance is silly. And then I got the other half saying, no, the ordinance needs to be here. And so shouldn't have they're not wanting to move their cars. It's a convenience thing for them. They had a sticker. Their kid is now out of college, doesn't even live there anymore. They're still using the stickers on the cars. And it's just like I told the mayor, I said, if we decide to keep it, obviously, I'm a good soldier, whatever you guys tell me you want me to do, we'll do it. But if we do keep the ordinance, then I think it's just fair that we enforce it every street throughout the whole village. And like I said, get ready, because we're going to have a lot of unhappy campers, and it's really not what I want. I don't think it's what you guys want, but there's going to be. I just don't think that we can enforce it on one or two streets and let the other streets go. We've got to be consistent. And
right. No, I agree with you, Chief. So let's move the conversation to the other end of the spectrum. So we can get rid of it, right? Just to allow everybody. Or do we want to say, get rid of it and allow streets to opt in if they want to have that to ensure that, right? Those are the other two alternatives we have. So right. I agree. Keeping it on the books and enforcing, I think we shouldn't do that. So that's my opinion. But right. I just want to think about, so what's the alternatives that we want to move towards instead?
Right. Right. Well, I agree. I think we could do something like, there are like certain villages or cities that, it's maybe we move away from it's like the overnight parking or whatever, but maybe it's just a different program. And it's about where we have, parking constraints. It's a parking permit to be able to park on the street, or maybe it's an overnight piece, but maybe it's just a completely different program. It's really tied to, where there isn't parking and where parking is an issue. And then, how we determine that, who wants to opt in or not, I'm completely open, but maybe we just make a different program.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, because Yeah, I mean, there's streets that obviously there's parking problems on, obviously. So I guess, I don't know, maybe it's time to ask. So, I mean, I know we're saying you can opt in. I guess we'd have to work through how that would actually take place, because you're gonna have residents on the street that are complete polar opposites on what they think.
Right. You have to,
Is it majority rules or, you know,
I would, I mean, if it was me, it's a democracy. And so I'll create a mechanism that allows everybody on that street to cast a vote somehow, you know,
almost
so,
like a homeowners association type thing.
yeah, but but again, it doesn't apply to anybody unless they ask to opt in, and then it has to be voted on by the residents of the street to decide, okay, does this whole street want this versus just a few individuals? Does the street as a majority want to have an enforcement in place that requires a overnight parking sticker or whatever?
I think Indian View was a street that is kind of, I think most of the people would love to see the, correct me if I'm wrong, but would love to see the 1 to 6 a.m. ordinance go away, because there's really no parking issue as far as they're concerned on Indian View. But wasn't the guy that sent the email in that obviously wanted to stay in place so much that he said he thought that the parking sticker should be a $500 sticker.
Right, right.
So, you know.
But so once again, you're not going to be able to please everybody. So then to me, I would default to, well, we're a democracy. So let's let the majority on that street decide how they want it to be done, you know?
And do it by street basis.
Well, and again, I'd say they have to opt in. Instead, because let's not make everybody vote on, I want to be excluded. Just sort of say, okay, let's go to the other end and say, this doesn't apply unless you want it to apply to your street. And it has to be voted on by the street.
I think a good way to do that too is we could do it by mail-in balloting, don't you think?
Yeah, and send it to your address.
Yeah. And this is a good opportunity for us to the hours of 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. Is that what makes sense if we create, a program specifically aimed to, ease the burden of parking for our residents on certain streets? Does this really accomplish that? I don't know. So it doesn't have to be this, I would say, if we didn't want it to be. It's an opportunity to look at it.
Right. Well,
yeah, I agree with you, Avi. I mean, if people come home from work and they're looking for a spot on the street, they're not going to wait till 1 o'clock in the morning to go back out there and find one of the ones that opened up that late at night. So,
right.
I would imagine the reason they come up with the 1 a.m. was, most people that has company over or whatever, has a get together or something. Most people, I think, are going to be done with their get together by 1 o'clock. Of course, at my house, it's going to be over about 10 because I'm going to bed. But, but yeah, I think that was probably, and again, who knows, but I think that's probably how they come up with the 1 a.m. versus midnight or whatever. So.
What's a get together?
What's that?
What's a get together?
Get together? Oh yeah.
It's where people.
Yeah, we haven't had those. We haven't been able to have those for a while, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be relevant for a while, but anyhow. So Rob, just to follow up your suggestion, so get rid of the ordinance in general, and then let people opt in to having the ordinance. But do we even need the ordinance to be, like, to Avi's point, 1 to 6? Do we try to cover more time, to deal with that? Because again, I don't think people are coming home at 12:59 going, dang, where am I going to park my car?
Right. No, that's a good question. I think it makes sense to make it. I think it makes sense to make it earlier. I don't know. What I don't know is where you draw the line. Is it 11? Is it 12? Is it
Is it 6?
6 in the evening.
Yeah. And we have to be careful too, because I agree. I think it's time to eliminate the ordinance. I am in support of that. But let's say it's my street for just an example. And so one person on my street, which there's 4 people on my street that even live on the street, but one person on my street wants to, I guess you count the condos, wants to have it, but then the other ones don't want to have it. What's the what's the threshold that you would even have a vote, right? I guess is where I'm going.
Well, it would just be a simple majority. I think like Rob is saying, I mean, it's a democracy. If you've got, a simple majority that wants it or not wants it, I mean, that's your decision maker. I guess my only concern with this, Rob, is like, what would the mechanism exactly be? I mean, if we say we're getting rid of the ordinance, but we're instituting this, opt-in kind of a thing. I mean, that to me entails some kind of an educational thing or an informational thing. And then who would be in charge of that on each street, say, or how would that work?
Well, to your point, right now, most people don't even know it exists.
Right.
And so again, removing the law and allowing it to opt in, I don't think is going to have that much of an impact because a lot of these people are already, parking on the street and not having any ramifications. There's only 2 streets in this whole village right now, again, Homewood and Settle, that have raised a concern about it. So, what we could do, since those are the only 2, is you could just have a flyer that goes to those 2 streets, all the houses on those 2 streets, and say, just on those 2 streets.
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously we'll let everybody in the village know, but I mean, really get it delivered to their door and say, this is what we're doing. So if, and we'll provide a mechanism. I would do the same thing with the voting. I would say, drop a ballot off at each house.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Or we could direct them towards the website and put some kind of tool on the website that they could.
Yeah, but see, you can always, then people are going to say, oh, well, then you can stuff the ballot box, right? Whereas if you hand a flyer.
We can have the ballot on the website that they would download the ballot off the website because it has to be a paper ballot. Yeah. Haven't we learned that lesson already?
Yeah. So, and again, if you have it, to me, if I handed it out, I would write the address on each one. So again, you can't stuff the ballot box. You just sort of say, okay, we have identified. So if you get 2 votes from the city, somebody's doing something funny.
Yeah. The ballot would have to have the address and a signature on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Or we could just abolish the ordinance and it's just gone. And if anybody particularly has an issue with it, then, they get a majority of their street to come to council and put forth an idea.
Yeah. You know what, Avi, that's a great point because, like Susie made the point, we're all kind of can figure it out. So, I mean, maybe the people on Homewood and maybe the people on Settle, get together and say, hey, what, let amongst us adults play well together and figure out what we should do rather than mandate coming.
Leaving it up.
Right.
Yep.
And
then it keeps it simple.
Yeah. And then that might, create a little unity by actually, I mean, I don't know Settle as well as Homewood, but I'm pretty confident the folks on Homewood are all, friendly with each other and can certainly have a conversation and, make a decision amongst themselves. And I know, I'd be happy to talk to the people on Homewood, or even they have a Facebook group that they've allowed me to be a member of. And I could certainly put a question out on there and say, here's what we're talking about. What do you guys think?
Mm-hmm.
And seeing if I could do that on Settle as well. But then to Rob's point, let's make a formal process. Or do we want to, there's 2 things. We can let people on the street just kind of talk amongst themselves and see what they want to do. Or maybe they'll be like, come to some other kind of conclusion that works for them.
Sure.
Or everybody gets a vote, we gather the votes and make a decision. I'm leaning towards letting people talk and figure it out themselves.
I agree with you because they may be more creative. They may come up with something else. They know their street better than we do, and they may find some other solution that we're not thinking of right now.
Yeah.
So I'm totally supportive.
Right. Do we need to over legislate?
No.
I mean, why don't we start there?
Sure.
I'll take that ball.
Okay. Hey, so I got an additional question because you also added, thank you for sending this stuff in advance. So does this mean we also get rid of the one that says you can't stay in one parking spot for more than 12 hours in a 24-hour period without authorization?
That's a good question.
Well, I think we got to keep that because that's, you know, that way if somebody calls and complains, and that's, you know, obviously we act on complaints on those because our guys don't go around and, you know, check every car to see if it's there for more than 12 hours in a 24-hour period. So, yeah, I think we need to leave that there. Just, you know, if somebody does abandon a vehicle or whatever, you know, people can call in and we've got that ordinance to be able to enforce.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that, you know, that allows people to address what potentially is a safety issue. You know, as far as
Right.
shenanigans.
Right. And that way too, like if someone has to be out of town and they don't have any place else to put their car, you know, they can let the police department know that,
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
Is that what happens now?
That's correct. It would go on the board that they're on vacation for 2 weeks. And then if somebody does call in, then we can explain to the person calling in that, you know, your neighbor's on vacation and we're aware of it. And yeah.
And again, this goes back to, you know, I mean, like if we go on vacation, remember when we used to do that? You know, I'll tell the next door, hey, we're going to be out of town. Can you keep an eye on the place? You know.
Yeah, we have those forms. I wish more residents would utilize that. There's a lot that do, but you know, I really wish everyone would. That way we can check on their house while they're gone. They don't come home to any surprises.
Well, yeah. And if we do, you know, if we do get to a point where we decide to put out a flyer, you know, that would be something we could include on there.
Yep.
But my thought is, you know, we start by just having a casual conversation with the folks on Homewood and the folks on Settle and let them kind of gather what they want to and make their own decision. And if we get to the point where we need to kind of step in and help out, then we can do that. But I kind of lean towards giving people the benefit of the doubt and letting them have a conversation and kind of figure it out on their own. And if we get pushed back on that, then we address it then.
So I agree with you. So
And
that means, if I'm understanding correctly, does that mean you're saying, so let's go ahead and do you want to wait till you have the conversation with Homewood and Settle before you propose removing this from the, I'm just trying to understand.
No, I think we do go ahead and make a decision in this meeting to vote whether or not we keep or not keep the ordinance in general. My opinion is we get rid of it in general.
Mhm.
And then, you know, then we can stress the urgency of having the conversation amongst themselves and figuring it out.
Okay. Got it.
Yep. Agree.
So do you want to
Let's take a
vote on it then?
Sure. I move that we remove the ordinance for no overnight parking between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m.
Well, so yeah, to be clear, it's like what you sent to us. It's B1 and 2, right?
Hold, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good. I just want.
Yes.
Chief, is there any other parts that are linked to that link to this overnight parking that we should be also? I wouldn't want us to take out part of it and not take out all of it, you know?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think
In section 79?
B1 and 2 would take care of that. Obviously, the 7613, what we talked about before, the continuous parking, we gotta leave that in there.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, because that kind of accomplishes more than just having not overnight parking. That, again, that's kind of more of a protection or a safety issue is the way I look at that one.
Okay, so actually, no, so I'm looking at the section online. So I guess we'd also want to do this because parallel parking on Murray Avenue is, so there's a section C as well. So there's B1 and 2, and then section C, parallel parking. All it says is Murray Avenue between Lane A and Plainville Road. Parallel parking shall remain unrestricted day and night, subject to free passage of traffic and to movement of fire equipment and fire trucks. Parking along the street will be subject to the same restrictions for other dedicated village streets on which overnight parking is permitted. So again, there's no reason that, I don't think there's any reason to have that in there either.
That's I wouldn't think so.
Right.
And we don't have that
I read
in
this.
front of us, but yeah.
Yeah. I read it all in depth in 2019. And if I'm remembering correctly, I agree with you.
Yeah,
Okay,
this is, there's restricted parking, which you have here, B, and then there's C, which is parallel parking, but the only entry for some interesting reason on parallel parking is Mariemont between Lane A and Plainville. So it seems like we would take that out as well.
okay. I'll make a note.
So, got it. B 1 and 2 and C out of section 79, schedule 2. Got it. Okay. I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I knew what all was in there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. Okay,
So
So-
that's what we're voting on, is remove those
Yeah.
to the,
And Kelly, it's probably worth just to take a peek, just to make sure, like do a quick search or whatnot in the ordinance so that it's not somewhere else. But there's no other components to it or any other reference, but
right. That's a good point. Thanks, Avia. No overnight reference elsewhere. Okay. And Rob is looking.
yeah. But the other section's about, the other section is just pure no parking.
That's
Part A, schedule 1 is no parking at all. So it tells all the different places where you can't park, period. Doesn't matter whether it's overnight or not.
Right.
Schedule 2 is limited parking. There's general stuff in here about some streets, but just which side of the street you can't park on, or what certain hours you cannot park. And then this part that talks about overnight is B,
B1 and 2,
C.
and
okay.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing it in, at least in chapter 29,
There's a lot.
79, chapter 79. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of options in the parking. So, okay. Anybody else have anything?
Nope, this feels right.
so we're voting in favor to remove it.
Yes, yes,
Okay, officially, and it's unanimous, right?
yes. Official and unanimous. Head shaking.
Yes.
Oh, and a thumbs up from the mayor.
You're not allowed to vote.
Look at that. We did something. Feels good.
We did something and we fell within the parameters given to us by ICRC. So yay for us.
Yep.
What, we only have 45 minutes tonight? Was
Yep.
that the deal? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
So
like meetings with
we
a
have for
time
another
limit.
9 minutes if you want to, but I don't know what we talk about.
No, we're
Hey,
good.
let's put 45 minutes on council.
Hey, that's a good idea. That's a great idea.
I like it. I like it.
Talk fast, Rob.
I,
I can do that.
All right.
all right.
Nice
Well,
to
hey,
see you
Merry
guys.
Christmas.
I'm gonna
Merry
adjourn the
Christmas,
meeting.
guys. If I don't see
All
you.
right. Thanks. Oh, you'll see us. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, Kelly.
Bye, guys.
Yes.
Okay. All right.